I had an awakening about this idea. It's not really something I came up with, but about 10 days ago, God spoke to me, and one of the ways that He speaks to me, He speaks to you too. I often think He's speaking a lot more than we're listening, but that's for another sermon, another day. But one of the ways that He communicates with me pretty frequently is through an author. And I love reading books with people that I actually know the author. Because as you're reading, you're actually thinking about them and how they would be communicating this. You see their posture, you see their tone, their intonation, you see all of that. Well, I was reading a book that was written just recently published called Shame Unmasked by Rick Patterson. He's a local Kalamazoo guy. Many of you people may know him. He's a pastor in our classes here in Kalamazoo, and Rick I got to know him about 15 years ago when we began planning and dreaming about starting a new church, and Centerpoint played a very small role in this. This was pre-River Days with a new congregation called Within Reach. That congregation ran from about 2000 to 2010. And Rick has been visiting Centerpoint from time to time, and we've been friends. We talk in the gym and whatnot. And so one of the times he dropped off this new release, and I want to read the book, but it wasn't because of the title. In fact, the title kind of turned me off. Shame Unmasked. The reason why I wanted to read the book is because I like Rick. I like the way he rolls. I like the way that he won't be painted into a box, and I think more pastors need to be more real. And so I like Rick. I like him as a person. So I want to read the book. But I'm saying to myself as I'm picking up the book, I don't have any shame issues. So I'm just reading this book because I want to see what Rick wrote. And then God interrupts my perfectly planned idea that I don't have any shame issues. And as I was reading the book, I was finding that God was beginning to speak to me. And again, He doesn't speak in this kind of audible voice. It's more of an intuition, more of a prompting. I've said before that my signature sin is pride. I've been pretty open about this, and I can't tell you how many times I've mentioned that I have had a lifetime struggle with trying to keep pride in its place. In fact, I've even used the terminology of prideaholic. So I've tried to be in pride recovery and doing the kinds of things that I think are pretty helpful in trying to keep pride in my rearview mirror. But as I'm reading this book, God started to arouse in me this idea to consider, is it possible that you've been labeling your signature sin incorrectly? What if you've got it wrong, is what I kind of sense God saying to me. What if your true malady isn't pride, but it's shame? What if you've been treating the symptom rather than dealing with the root? Further, what if your discovery is something that I want to, this is God speaking, share with the whole congregation? That I want to awaken within Centerpoint this idea that rather than trying to deal with sinful behaviors, what we might call behavior modification, that we get closer to the root. Is it possible that shame is the root of all sin? You know some of my story. It was lean as a rail in high school. When you're a high school senior and you're 6'2" and 145 pounds, you don't like being 145 pounds. I'm just here to tell you, okay? And my body was built for running. And I was fast, but I ran cross country and track, not so much out of the love of the sport, but out of the love of the recognition attached to that sport. I loved the fact that I could fill my varsity jacket with medals, and the jingle of those medals down the hall of my high school served as a walking showcase. And I sensed maybe that God was trying to poke at me. You know how the Holy Spirit does this? And He's poking at me saying, is it possible that in all of your running you were trying to run away from not being enough, from a label of shame? And what if when I got to college, I started lifting and lifting and lifting? I mean, insane amounts of weights, because I didn't want to be viewed as not enough, that I wanted to get out from underneath the weight of that label. And is it possible that when I came to what was then Third Reformed, is it possible that I worked crazy hours and did whatever it takes in order to grow the largest youth group in the city, that is it possible that some of that fuel was associated with this whole idea that I don't want you to not see me as being enough? What if it's shame? What if all along my Achilles heel has been shame? What difference would that make? And what if all of the other things that I'm not going to tell you about, okay? 1,000 different ways in which I hide and cover, and I couldn't guess what percentage, but there's got to be some percentage of my huffing and puffing that is associated with trying to hide. And is it possible that my covering in my fig leaf and my hideout of pride is really a cover-up for my dirty little secret, which is shame? That I can't stand the idea that you would think less of me, that I wouldn't measure up, that if you took away the lights and the mic in the big church, what would you think of me? Would I be enough? So as I'm having this kind of not a happy conversation with the Lord, I sensed, again, this isn't an audible voice. It's not how my experience has been with God. But I kind of sensed him whispering to me, I'm enough. I've always been enough. You don't have to be enough because I'm enough. You don't have to be the strongest, fastest, the biggest in the room. I'm enough.